watched only 3 videos on underconsumption before someone recommended that I dye my socks with beets. Underconsumption is a hot topic right now, but because it's social media, a lot of the tips I see on underconsumption are a little bit extreme. So I decided to spend a couple of hours doing some research into materialism and overconsumption to develop 7 science-backed tips on how to consume less as a regular, imperfect person just trying to be better. So let's just dive straight into it. Why is overconsumption bad? I'll be brief here, but it's bad for the environment. Excess products take more fossil fuels and resources to produce, and worst of all, a lot of these products are barely used and then sent straight to the landfill. It's bad for humanity, considering that a lot of products use underpaid labor, child labor, or even slaves to produce cheaper goods. And it's probably bad for you. Many studies have shown that overconsumption, or at least a preoccupation with consumption, can lead to reduced life satisfaction, lower levels of happiness, worse relationship outcomes, worse academic performance, and even health issues. Obviously, that's bad. Now, interestingly enough, the correlation between these studies and materialism isn't as strong as one might think. This led Burroughs and Rindfleisch in 2002 to propose a theory that the individual orientation of material values conflicts with collective-oriented values, such as family values and religious values. This state of values conflict creates psychological tension, and this tension is associated with a reduced sense of well-being. I agree with this. I can't speak to all societies and experience, obviously, but as an American, this rings particularly true. Growing up, I was raised to value family, relationships, generosity. It's important to love your neighbor and love the earth, and go outside and touch some grass every once in a while. But then we live and work in a society where those values are obviously not the ones that are most important. As noted by Brewer and Porter, our lives today are dominated by the material objects that proliferate all around us, including the prospects and problems they afford. What's most important in American society is getting ahead. To have the nice car, the latest iPhone, the hyper-specific wardrobe that matches the hyper-specific personality that's trending on TikTok. Between the values that we were raised with and the values that society presents as most important, there is a tension there. And I think that this tension is what makes overconsumption such a guilt-inducing cycle. We know better, and yet we live in a society that is relentlessly pushing us to consume more. And of course, we're gonna fall into that cycle of overconsumption. After all, it's what everyone else is doing, but it still feels icky, doesn't it? Let's talk more about society broadly. What pushes us to consume more? Well, broadly, we consume more because we exist in a society that encourages it. Capitalism is built around consumption of goods. Now, I'd like to say that consumption isn't wrong. To exist as a human is to consume resources. But those voices that are pushing us to consume more have already gotten stronger over the years, and I expect to get stronger as it continues. Philip Kotler, who some people describe as the father of modern marketing, describes it as this: "It took nearly 70 years for marketing to evolve from its product orientation to the concept of human centricity." Basically, marketing has shifted from focusing on the product and the unique solution it offers to focusing on the end consumer and how the product will make you feel. I think this quote from Kotler is particularly illuminating. Customers look for not only functional and emotional satisfaction, but also spiritual fulfillment from the brands they choose. I'll say it, gross. This problem is only going to get worse with the onset of big data and AI. The way most people market now is to break consumers, which includes everyone in the market, into easily digestible segments. This process is known as segmentation. This is helpful because instead of just marketing to everyone broadly, you can market to hyper-specific groups, like women in New York City with disposable income over $40,000, or young men in Arizona with college degrees. Segmentation also makes it easier to market to people because you can focus on their hyper-specific needs and wants. I, for example, am a 20-something woman in New York City, which means I get relentless ads for GLP-1 shots. All the time. It's following me everywhere. It's on the subway, it's on my laptop, it's on my phone. I'm constantly being advertised to get injections for weight loss. But what's interesting about this is that these segments of people are getting smaller and smaller every single day. Kotler says, "Big data analytics enables marketers to personalize their marketing strategy to each customer, a process known as segments of one marketing." Basically, marketing capabilities are getting so advanced that they can market to your specific wants and needs, but also your insecurities and your desires. If this sounds a little creepy, it's because it is. In the context of overconsumption, it's getting harder and harder to ignore that voice that's pushing you to consume more, because that voice intimately knows you, and it can follow you anywhere. So this brings me to tip number 1, which is to limit your exposure to marketing. This means unsubscribing from email marketing and text messaging, paying for content instead of being advertised to, and assessing what people on social media are pushing goods to you in a way that feels bad. By bad, I mean they're telling you that this product will make you a certain kind of person, or they're adding a lot of FOMO elements to it. So this product is rapidly selling out, I'm only making a couple of these, you have to get these now if you want to be the it girl of fall, whatever. People who are constantly recommending products. It takes a while to actually test if you like a product or not. So if an Instagrammer is pushing, here's the 30 things I bought this week that I love, that's too many products. I'll go a little bit more into what I mean by pushing an identity in a moment. Another factor in overconsumption is the increasing prevalence of loneliness within our society. One study found that loneliness significantly contributes to materialism, and interestingly enough, materialism significantly contributes to loneliness. So it's a bit of a vicious cycle. It's important to highlight that this relationship only exists when participants were buying goods to soothe their loneliness in what Peters called happiness medicine. If someone is buying goods just for material mirth, that association is less present. I believe that this demonstrates that there is a right way to consume things. This brings me to tip number 2, which is to put a wait time on products. I always wait 24 hours before purchasing a new product, but some people might find a time limit of 1 month even helpful. I keep track of all the products I want in a Notion page called Links, and then when the time limit has passed, I go back and look at the products to see which ones I still want. The time limit helps remove that emotional aspect of purchasing. If, like Peters highlighted, I'm using the purchase to emotionally soothe myself, that emotion has passed by the time I'm reassessing the product, so I can look at it with a clear head. Tip number 3 also goes back to the research that Peters conducted, and it's to replace purchasing with doing something social. Like Peters mentioned, overconsumption can be a symptom of loneliness. So to combat that, it's important to go out and experience your community. Community is incredibly important when fighting against materialism because it reminds us that the most fulfilling things in life aren't tangible, but they're the experiences that we have with one another. A lot of studies I read also connected religion and materialism. Almost all religions scorn having a lot of material possessions, and so religion has a sort of moderating effect on overconsumption. As American society broadly moves away from religion, as it has over the past few decades, I'm assuming that this moderating effect is diminishing, and this also coincides with the so-called loneliness epidemic. I'm wondering if these two trends broadly are pushing overconsumption and materialism to even new heights, but I think that's the topic for a different video. Why do we want it? I think Peters brings up an interesting point. If you're consuming for the right reasons, you won't have the emotional pain associated with overconsumption, and also you'll probably consume less to begin with. So, which means I think now is the time to talk about conspicuous consumption. This term was coined by Thorstein Veblen in 1899. It describes the phenomenon of buying excessive goods or goods of particularly high quality to flaunt your economic wealth and power. Basically, you're buying goods, you're overconsuming just to show others that you simply can. Interestingly enough, I think public perception of excess wealth has changed over time, so it's not seen as favorable. After the 2008 economic recession and COVID, having a bunch of flashy goods just is a bit cringe. Along with increasing wealth inequality, it just kind of feels like bad taste. This changes a lot based on what social circle you're in, and I can really only speak from my own experiences. But broadly, I do think it's true. I mean, having a trust fund is kind of cringe, right? That's why every kid you went to college with could never admit it. And that's why I have a new theory. I think it's less about conspicuous consumption, which is buying things to show off your wealth, and more about identity consumption, which is buying things to show what kind of person you are. In Colorado, if you're an outdoorsy person, you have a Subaru or a Toyota, and you have the Arc'teryx jacket or the Patagonia vest. There are basically very specific goods you consume to show off the kind of person you are. Like, this image is so common it's almost stereotypical. This form of consumption is also blatantly apparent online. There's the trad wife, who has endless supplies of flowy dresses and a KitchenAid mixer. There's the clean girl, whose bathroom is littered with sprays and lotions for every season, mood, and skin affliction, all curated in little modern glass bottles. And then, of course, there's the infamous that girl. I've noticed that girl completely revolves around the items that she consumes. The that girl is all about avocado toast, Hailey Bieber nails, matching workout sets, Stanley cups, all-white apartment, always pan, and of course Pilates class multiple times a week. If the that girl is so 2023, I also don't want to hear it because I've been off TikTok since 2023, so I don't know what's going on. Broadly, I don't know why this is so big now, but I think it's because it's easier to buy your way into an identity than crafting one of your own. But all of this brings me to my next tip, which is to identify your want. First, ask yourself, do I actually want this, or do I want it because it'll say something about me to other people? Will it align me with a certain persona that I want other people to think I have, or will it show people that I have excess wealth and power? If you're looking at a product and you do actually want it, then I think it's fine to buy it. But if you find yourself falling into one of the other categories I mentioned, ask yourself why. Why do you want to be associated with a certain group of people? Do you think other people will see you as more valuable, maybe more deserving of love and attention? Is perhaps the real desire just to be a part of a community? community? If that is the case, then I think it's important to remind yourself that real love and respect can't be bought. And if it's community you're lacking, then buying a good is a weak substitute for the real thing. Consuming with purpose. Like I mentioned earlier, to exist is to consume. We all need clothes and food and shelter, and those needs aren't going to go away no matter how minimalistic we become. So basically, if you need something, you should consume it. For example, one of my favorite hoodies in the world is my See You Buffs hoodie. But because I love it so much, I wear it a lot, and I wore it until a giant hole formed in it. And no, this was not a hole that could be fixed. This was like the fabric was thinning so much that it was irreparable. So now I need a new hoodie. That's a need. Wants, on the other hand, are where it gets a little more tricky. For the record, I think it's totally okay to want things and buy something just because you enjoy it. Life is about enjoying things. And I don't think underconsumption has to look like living in a sad gray box. But the key here is to only consume things that you will genuinely use and enjoy. This brings me to my next tip, which is asking yourself, is there a way to try this product without actually buying something new? For example, maybe you want to start bullet journaling. And it can be tempting to run out and buy the moleskin journal with all the glittery pens and maybe some aesthetic washi tape. But before you do that, use one of the old notebooks that you have lying around. Okay, and I know that if you're someone who's considering bullet journaling, you 100% have extra notebooks lying around. Take that old notebook, use it for 30 days. See if it's something you actually enjoy doing and are able to integrate into your daily life. And if you find that it is, then I say go for it. Buy the moleskin notebook, buy your glittery pens, do whatever you want to do. Because now you know that you will enjoy it and actually use it. I think that's the key here, joy. I know for this video I've mostly been quoting academic sources, but for this section Marie Kondo came to mind. Considering that her entire career is built around thinking about stuff, I think it's okay to include her. When people think of the Marie Kondo method, they tend to think of extremism. Getting rid of every single thing you own and living in a perfect, peaceful, minimalist box. But if you read her book, she actually highlights exactly what I'm saying here. Her entire premise of tidying is to keep things that spark joy and things you need. She even says that if having 200 dresses in your closet is what makes you happy, then have 200 dresses in your closet, but you better make sure that you truly enjoy every single one of those dresses. Another tip for consuming properly is to do research into the thing that you're buying. Buy right, buy once. Personally, my purchasing habits of clothing completely changed once I learned more about construction of garments and what fabrics work best. The fabric, the construction, the technique, and putting it all together completely changes the quality of the clothing and even its use case. Slow Down in Style has a fantastic video on it, which I'll link down below. But of course, this goes beyond just clothing. Whenever I'm buying a new thing, I do some extensive research on it. I try to buy a sustainable product that's within my budget and that I'll have for a really long time. There's a subreddit called Buy It for Life, which can be helpful for certain product recommendations, and so I recommend checking that out as well. Or, of course, just reading reviews. And I also recommend looking into buying things secondhand, especially electronics, which have such a huge carbon footprint. If this seems like a lot of work, it can be. But whenever I feel like I don't want to do research and I just want to buy the thing, I think back to all the times I ordered something impulsively and finally pulled it out of the box only to realize that this thing was not nearly as nice as I was expecting. It's not a great feeling. My last tip, which may seem a little hippie or woo-woo compared to the tips before, is to practice experiencing awe. One article I found highlighted the importance of the feeling, saying that 3 experiments showed that participants who felt awe relative to other emotions felt they had more time available and were less impatient. Participants who experienced awe also were more willing to volunteer their time to help others, more strongly preferred experiences over material products, and experienced greater life satisfaction. Experiences of awe bring people into the present moment, and being in the present moment underlies awe's capacity to adjust time perception, influence decisions, and make life feel more satisfying than it otherwise would. Awe is sort of a unique emotion, and I think it helps us remember our place in the greater world. Now, this sounds like it might be a difficult emotion to capture, but the experiment that Rudd conducted was actually quite simplistic. All participants did was read a short story about ascending the Eiffel Tower and seeing Paris from above. Another group read another story, but they just climbed sort of a boring building and saw a non-descriptive landscape. Once they read the story, the group that experienced Paris from above, the awe group, were more likely to choose experiences over material goods. To practice awe in your daily life, I think it's important to experience things that you normally wouldn't. Whether that's reading a story set on a far-off continent or watching a movie that highlights a life experience that we never had, it's just important that the material makes you realize how vast the world is. And while the experiment didn't cover this, I think you can also experience awe by going small. Stop for a moment and look at the world around you. Look at the trees, the blades of grass. Look at the web of a spider and wonder yourself how it even knows to do that. Or simply look at all the people around you and realize that every single one of them has a life that's as complex, challenging, and rich with experiences as yours. Well, friends, if you made it this far into the video, I really appreciate you watching. Thank you so much, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye!